Hello, my name is Aaron Peterson, and welcome to Now You Know Media, an ad-wanted podcast network show where we go inside real media organizations to understand how they operate, what makes them unique, and what agencies and brands often misunderstand about them. Founded in 1979, Rivendell Media focuses on reaching LGBTQ plus audiences across print, digital, and integrated media channels. Joining me today is Todd Evans, CEO of Rivendell Media. Hi, Todd.
Hey, how are you, Aaron?
Glad to have you. Now, Todd has been with the organization for over 30 of the company's nearly 50 years, so he has extensive experience and knowledge in this space. So I'm really excited to have you on today to talk through some of this. Todd, what we talked about earlier before we got on is that, what we really kind of want to understand is, what's unique about Rivendell Media and your approach to the business and to reaching out to advertisers and agencies, to showcasing the audiences that you uniquely have access to. And, really when it comes down to it, what you also represent at a broader scale is you represent a niche media and a niche audience group. And so we kind of want to use you as a way to also understand what it takes to represent a niche audience at scale and be successful at it for so many years as you all have been. So very excited to dive into this with you.
Thanks for having me.
For people hearing about Rivendell for the first time, how would you describe what it is that you all do?
What we are is a media rep firm, pure and simple. And what makes us unique in our space is we represent about 95% of all the media, LGBTQ media that exists in the United States. So our job really is to make it simple, easy, and most of all, profitable for agencies to recommend and utilize LGBTQ media.
And so when you originally started, was that part of the problem you were trying to solve?
Well, yes, it was, most LGBT media, even today, is local. And back in the olden days, before the internet, extremely hard to find. Now, the internet came along, makes it easy to find, but, things live forever on the internet. If you do a Google search, half the things aren't even in business anymore. So it's kind of interesting. It's the same as when we started right now. It's kind of funny.
Yes, I mean, I certainly can remember going back, there being more localized print LGBT publications, in major cities. And now a lot of those media, like you say, did evolve and become, go online, as it were, and so still exist in some form or another. But it has been interesting to watch that evolution in the space. And it's not just LGBTQ plus media, but other media like that in local spaces have also had similar evolutions, I see.
Sure.
How has the that mission to bring that local forward really evolved as the media landscape has shifted towards digital and programmatic then?
Yeah, well, it's, everything old is new again. It makes it a little difficult sometimes because one unique thing about the LGBT market is print is still very much king. And but I feel like I'm the only one saying that, but we know it in practice because most of the LGBT market is very physical. So you go to an LGBT business establishment, that's where you might often have contact with the media. But just like you said, it's all evolved over the years. So every great and good LGBT print product has a digital extension attached to it. So it's unique and it's involved, and then programmatic added just another layer to it, but it's a very useful layer in media deserts, of course. It just would never be your first step, I would say, in this marketplace.
That makes sense. What makes your approach then sort of different from simply just buying placements in LGBT-focused outlets?
Well, another unique thing about our market is there's Black gay publications, Hispanic gay publications, Asian gay publications, people for older people, for younger people, for lesbians, right? So it's not just about being tagged as an LGBT title, which goes back to that programmatic option, right? It's a lot more than that. And nobody wants all the market. They want the part that's going to be most responsive to them. So it's really about understanding the whole market. What makes us unique, because we represent so much, we feel a real obligation to tell an agency everything that's available, whether we rep it or not, so that they're just completely informed. Then we're going to give them our expert advice. And then, of course, the client's going to do what the client wants to do anyway. In the end, they're going to be the final choice and make their own decisions. But, as an expert, we always want to tell them what's the best practice and how to move forward.
That makes a lot of sense, and I mean that's very admirable of you to approach business that way. I think it intersects with every other facet of human existence, right? Um, Age, gender, ethnicity and race, all those things, disability or not, and you can find LGBTQIA plus audiences everywhere. Now, the research has consistently shown that over the last sort of 30 to 40 years, this demographic has, they want to be marketed to. And not only that, but they are actively looking for companies that support the community.
It's a savvy consumer, right? And especially when you're targeting LGBT specific media, because who reads it? Not every LGBT person reads it, just like you said, but the ones that care read it, right? The ones that are most concerned about our issues are going to be reading it, and hopefully, transmitting that information onward to the greater community. So it is definitely a savvy community. But I always say, showing up is what matters most, right? People in a savvy community, they know if you're hawking a spirit or a beer or whatever, and just showing up shows your support for that community. So, I just think showing up is always the first best step.
And I know that in a lot of the work that you guys do, you talk a lot about research and audience intelligence. Why is that so central to part of your value proposition, and why do you talk so much about the audience and the research behind it when you're going out to these agencies and brands?
Because the research has only gotten better, right? So when we started, it was really on a hunch, right? Double income, no kids, urban dwellers. And I think for the first 10 years, the founder of the company was like, yeah, we believe you, Joe, but where's the research, right? And then as those demographic studies came out, I mean, the first biggest one was in New York Magazine, where it was the most potentially profitable, untapped market in America. And it really just made sense for the readers of those publications, right? They were in top 10 US markets, mostly male read, mostly white. It's exactly what you would think. And I always say advertising really is all about common sense anyway. But over the years and year after year, we did more and more research, and it really has played out to be that dream market. It really is a good market for those people that are interested, one, in reaching men. I'm sure in mainstream media, men's the most expensive market to reach anyway. Sports is very expensive, so it's a really great way to reach in that way. And people that care. There's so many. The research is just so nice and layered in that there's a lot of like environmentalists in the LGBT community. There's just layer after layer. And one thing that we provide all that for free. So we house anything that's readily available in the public sphere for free. And we will pass that on to anyone that needs it to help justify their media campaigns, to make them look good. And, that's really our job. We want more ads, so we got to give them the information to give us more ads.
Well, that's really great. I mean, and give a little to get a little. I think that, makes sense. I can certainly respect that mantra. That being said, even with all the, growing research and the fact that the research is sort of telling a great story for that audience, what are some of the biggest misconceptions that brands have about LGBTQ audiences today?
That's a great question. Biggest misconception is, I can't advertise because I have to do all these giant things with HR and have a equality all the way. And you really don't have to do it. If that was the case, there would have been no one advertising, because really corporate America is not perfect. And of course, thank God everybody knows that. But showing up, right, is showing up. Hawking a product, there's nothing wrong with that, right? It's all the layers that you want to get in. So when you show up is step one, I would say. Maybe you want to be more inclusive in your advertising and show, let's say, same-sex couples, two men or two women. Each layer that you bring onto it is going to increase that. I always say it's impact versus exposure. By just going in there, you're getting that exposure, and then you want to create more impact as time goes on. So like, everyone knows the Absolut story, right? They showed up, did a great job. Well, fast forward to today, there's like 100 vodkas today, right? So it becomes, how much do you want to stand out from the crowd? And it's really what corporate comfort level is today. And today it's not nearly as comfortable as it used to be. So I always say, you just need to show up. And asking for the business. People aren't stupid. It's just like my local paper, my local straight mainstream paper, right? I see a company in there. I'm like, oh, they're supporting our town. I want to support them. It's in my proximity. I'm going to go there, that type
Right.
of thing. And it's the same for LGBT people, especially when you have choices of a company that is reaching out to you versus one that's not.
It's true. I mean, yeah, when the choice is there, yeah, you're probably going to be more likely to want to work with a company or brand that supports you or is somewhat aligned with you, or shows some support for your community in some way or another. So, what is something that the data shows that maybe marketers overlook?
Well, back to what I just said. Showing up is important alone, right? If they show up, you are generally noticed, but they also notice when you stop showing up. So any minority marketing, whatever market segment you're going after, is going to show you that one and done usually doesn't work that well. In my field in particular, you get a lot of people that would show up just at gay pride. And there's a lot of people even in our own community that were like, oh, you shouldn't do that. It's a waste. I don't think so. I think showing up at Gay Pride is a start for anybody, right? It's a celebration, it's a
Sure.
feel good experience. And a lot of people that come, LGBT consumers that come to Pride, that's the only time they're out, or that's the only time they're out in public. So it's a real great chance just to be seen that you showed up for that. And then you can build upon that as time goes on. See what your response is like. Not so good, hold off. But I just feel like a lot of people feel like they have to do all these check boxes to just start, and you really don't have to do that.
Well, then, and that's, I think, great advice for a lot of companies out there who might be afraid to, to make that step because they might be afraid that if they do that, they might be seen as, performative or something like that. And to your point, yes, maybe if they only show up that way for a long period of time, then they may eventually have that perception. But I think showing up, especially now, showing up is important. But after showing up, what would you say to those brands who want to then move beyond that performative inclusion and really do want to move towards a real audience engagement strategy with the community?
Well, it's just creating a greater impact, right? It's funny. People say when you show up like in national LGBT media, you're speaking to us as a community, right? When you're showing up in my local paper, then I'm like, oh, you're speaking to me, right? And I need to buy a car, right? So who's in the auto section and who am I gonna, specifically look at to me? So it's just about increasing the engagement and what you're looking for, actually. Are you looking to increase subscribers? So many people don't follow through even on the good things that they do. So like, donate to, let's say, human rights campaign or something like that, and then they don't tell anybody. So I always say, you really, the media is your friend, and it's a matter of creating a conversation. Whatever you're comfortable with, that conversation can be. And then just being authentic about the whole thing, right? So if you were called out, like, hey, you have non-discriminative, you've had this problem, answer it truthfully. Well, we're just getting started, folks. We just showed up, and there's nothing wrong with that.
I
One interesting, timely thing I just would say is people that have tripped up, they forget to say they're sorry, right? People, I always say, all of America, we're very forgiving, but we do expect authenticity, and I would say this audience is really all about that. Anyway.
I mean, I totally agree with you. I think that the big point is for showing up. And if you do make a mistake, I think it's the best point to own it, and also to, like you say, be upfront about the fact that you're on the start of this journey. And I think that's true for businesses and for people. We have empathy and understanding for those who are making the effort. And so, you can still make the effort, you can make attempts. Obviously, the best thing to do is to speak with experts like yourself who can also provide guidance so that you can, hopefully avoid any missteps. And to lean on research and things like that, that of course can help to inform your business decisions and strategies.
It all works together. The research, right? Then your agency is there to hopefully guide you and, make sure with your creative that everything's fine. And then you're going to get feedback from this audience, right? So positive or negative, but you just accept it. And we've, 45 years, I've never really had anyone had a real negative experience.
I mean, like you said, the audience we're speaking to can be pretty forgiving if they are, at
If you're
least
authentic.
if you're authentic and you show that you're trying. So, pivoting a little bit, you spoke earlier in our conversation about how print is still playing a critical role particularly in this community, and even in combination with the digital campaign. So, for instance, with this community, you can't just rely on programmatic because it's not necessarily going to be effective in the ways that you might expect it to be. Why is it that print is still often underestimated today, and especially with this group?
I predict a print resurgence just all around at a certain point because it has this. It's like a stabilizing factor. I always say, like on Instagram, if you forget to like it, you'll never find that product again, right? It sits there and it sits with you, but it also draws you to the digital, right? So all print, in the olden days, there was always extra pages and we can get you added value that way. There's no extra pages because the cost of print has gone up so much. But what they do instead, everyone wants to monetize their digital. So, you might have a story. You want to read more about the subject? Go to WashingtonBlade.com. You want to see the workout pictures of this thing? I just saw it in National Geographic the other day. You want to see more pictures of the Titanic? Go to natgeo.org, right? So it works best in conjunction. And but what's one nice thing about print and LGBT, with a lot of people being skittish, if you're in just local LGBT media, virtually only the community is going to see you. Right? Only the people that care the most are going to see you. It's a little different when you get to national. That's like a little step up, national LGBT media. But when you go to the digital and you're out there on the internet, then you can be forwarded and all different things. So it's a really nice step. But the best campaigns work together. And it also goes back to what are your current assets. I tell my staff all the time, you can't sell them print if they only have digital assets, right? You got to inform them as an expert and then give them a plan, what you think is going to work for them.
Have you had any examples where you have, either done print or digital only or print plus digital, and you've seen that the print plus digital shows greater results? Has there been anything where that has been tangible?
Tons, because at a certain point, everybody started cutting print, and which we didn't like. But at that time, we didn't even know ourselves, right? But what we have learned since 2009, when we started our digital division, anyone that does print and digital, the digital will do about 30% better, right? And it's just like I said, it's because the print is leading you to the digital. Some people only read digital. Some people, older people, might only read print, but most are in between, right? And my greatest case study, great example, was the last election with the DNC. Typical, we only want to do digital. Here's our budget. We're ready to go. They could see the disappointment on our face, I think. And they were like, what's wrong? And I said, well, it's just not going to do as well. And they literally did a huddle and they came back and they said, okay, same budget. You're the expert, do what you want. And I haven't had that in like 10 years, where someone really gave you the budget and said, you're the expert, do it. Do you know that it was the only market segment in the DNC that actually overperformed and came in under budget?
Wow.
LGBT people, 15 points moved toward Harris than they did for Joe Biden previously. It really was successful, but it was really a print first campaign. But then we did all the digital extensions. And then there are, in LGBT, there are some media deserts, and especially, the Dakotas, let's say, where there's just not a lot of LGBT media. So then we did programmatic to make sure we caught everybody. And I will never forget when it was done. I felt like so satisfied, but you never know until you get the reports back and how it works. And of course, we were all disappointed with that campaign, the election overall.
Sure.
But the DNC gave us the keys to come back for the midterms. They were so happy with it. So, but it just shows you how it really works together. And another great example, we had Mercedes. They had, like the dream client, loved print, but also was doing digital. But at a certain point, they cut all the print. And they were like, why is the digital just average now? Why is the digital just average? And we find it with every campaign. If you have both, it goes right to average. And trust me, there's nothing wrong with average, but people in market segmentation, they want above average, right? But it's definitely that. And we just see it over and over. So some have come back to print, which is really nice. And, I'm very hopeful for the future that most people will actually look at the research.
Agree. I definitely agree on that. And I also agree with your earlier statement too, where I feel like there is sort of that comeback of, print and tactile media in general. I know, personally, I recently have pulled out, my DVD collection and sort of reevaluated it and said, it's kind of interesting because some of these movies or TV shows I actually can't find on a major streaming platform. So, thankfully I still have that physical media. And so in that same sort of vein, I think we are seeing a bit of a resurgence towards some of those physical medias. But even with that being said, like you said, a lot of agencies and a lot of brands are still under a lot of pressure to cut traditional channels. How do you guide them, when they are put under that pressure by, the folks that they report to?
Well, I get a lot of that, right? And I said, well, print has been measured for 150 years, so it can be measured. Unfortunately, in this industry, it's a lot of really young people that do a lot of the, for lack of a better term, the grunt work, right? And they've grown up in a little different way than a lot of these market segments have, right? So I'm constantly pushing them back to the research. But again, we want them to be happy. It depends what their assets are. So we don't do a lot of pushback. We tell them what we think, but we mostly let them let the chips fall where they lie because they know what's going to make their client. It's hard to push back against a client, as you know, and all our clients are agencies, and so they have their client, and if the client's pushing them, but it can be a big mistake, and it has been for a few companies that have pulled from print completely because they're suddenly gone. And there's some annual research that's done every year about demographics, and you can pretty much see the companies go up that do marketing campaigns and the companies come right back down that don't. Target is a really great example right now. Always up there, one of our great customers all the way up till 2019. Then COVID hit, COVID changed a lot of things, but they're down, down, down every single time down, but they're completely absent. They've never stopped communicating completely, and people notice. I always say there's nothing like being dropped by your best friend. You never forget it. So that's something that you do have to be careful of. And especially when you go over the top to be inclusive, right? They didn't have to do all that, but then they cut it completely. That's why if I were to had a product that was good for this market, I would just hawk the product. That's what I would do as an expert. I wouldn't make any statements or anything like that. Hey, I got this great vodka. You're a good consumer for it. I think you should buy because it's great. And that's how I would do my marketing. But everyone's a little different, and you got to tweak everything, and then arm them with the research, the ammunition to make sure their questions are answered.
Definitely agree with that. Now, pivoting a little bit, we talked also that one of the things that we wanted to understand was a little bit about what it's like sort of running a specialty media company, the reality and the day-to-day. What are some of the biggest operational challenges, that you have when you're representing sort of a niche audience across multiple platforms now?
Staying on top of the media. You can have a fabulous media kit and have no readership, right? You can have a fabulous website that has no traffic. Most media markets today have quite a few LGBT publications, right? So nobody can afford all of them. So it's about, showing up not just in the media, but in the right media within that marketplace. So, like for instance, if you're Miller Lite or something like that, I would probably recommend one set of publications versus your Gilead Pharmaceuticals might be more newsy publications or things where there's HIV information and stuff like that. So when you represent so much of the market, it's hard to please the publishers because they feel like there's just this barrel of ads here waiting to be placed in them and you're the roadblock. But we really disseminate all the information, recommend what we think is best, and then it goes into the agency's hands, and then they work with their clients and they decide what they think is best. and they know all the ins and outs of their client and what assets they have and how it's going to be. And, I think the hidden secret, though, in any minority marketing or market segmentation is the companies like mine, they want you to succeed pretty much more than you want to succeed because they want that business to come back. So
Sure.
no one's going to recommend a title just because to recommend a title. They're only going to recommend what they really think is going to work and fit your budget and do it because the business isn't built on one and done. What got us through COVID was all those clients that had been with us for years that stayed the course, right? And built on it. We had a little saying here. I wrote it on my notes before I came here. It's inclusion equals loyalty equals advocacy, right?
Oh, I
So
love that.
no, but it's so true, and it's true about a lot of things. But if you're included, it's like, oh, great, I'm included, and now I feel loyal to that company, right? And so I'm always going to go there. I'm going to buy my car there instead of the other one. And then when they have a problem, you tend to be their advocate. Oh yeah, I heard about that, but they've been really good to me. That type of thing.
So true.
That's what the DNC campaign was all about, right? Do most LGBT people vote Democratic? Probably, right? But it's all that small percentage that makes the big difference. And 15% is a huge difference in a market segment to go
Of
one
course.
way or another,
Yeah,
right?
because I mean, imagine if that same sort of thing had been applied to one or two or three other segments, it would have made potentially the difference. You know what I mean, in
Absolutely.
the outcome of the election. And so you're
And
absolutely right
that's what
there.
it's funny you say it. I say that about so many mainstream markets. Like remember the old days, the cola wars, Coke and Pepsi, right? Their wars were based on like 3% of an audience. You could sway this marketplace. I guarantee if one of them would come to the table in a decent way, it could change that equation for them. And that's what we look at when we're trying to pitch consumers. We're like, who's in a very competitive marketplace where like the LGBTQ market can make all the difference. And hopefully we'll get that right chief marketing officer who will tell his agency that, hey, we want to investigate this. And that's when the magic really does happen, actually.
And so then when these media companies are engaging with you as a niche media brand or as a niche media properties, what's something that those buyers often misunderstand about what it's like to work with specialized media companies? What's something maybe they get wrong?
Well, I think they get wrong that it can be so easy, right? It really is easy if you're with an expert. They know everything, about their marketplace, right? And who's good and who's not, and even their competition, right? I have a few clients right now that have asked like, oh, what do you think about that? Is that a competitor? I'll be like, well, yeah, that is a competitor, and that might be a good option for you too, right? I even say it goes back to authenticity with the firm you're dealing with too. How open are they? How transparent are they on how the business works? I mean, we're very clear. We're a media rep firm. The publications are really our boss, right? It's one of those weird things where you have two bosses. You have the agency people, paying you and making it happen, right? But you're really on the publication side. So obviously, you're never going to get a bad thing about me about any publication. But what you are going to get are the facts and figures about it. 25 years ago, I would go and be on like it wasn't a podcast, on a panel, right? And there would be a black media expert, a Hispanic media expert, and we would all compare notes and they were pretty much very much the same. Today, it's so different because with the technology change, print has remained strong with us, but it hasn't in most of those other minority media markets. And a lot of the reason is because of television, right? We don't have any television. So it's really changed. And unfortunately, most of the people buying multicultural media or niche media are the same buyers, and they often make assumptions about the LGBT market based on those other markets. And now they couldn't be any more different, really. So that's definitely a challenge that I have to explain to people. Like, no, it's not all about your phone. LGBT people don't like to be bothered on their phone actually as much as other marketers. They're looking for that next hot date on their phone. So it might not be the best place to start.
Yeah,
That's
that's
it.
a great point. I mean, that is a great point, which is that, yeah, every audience, is different. And, there are a lot of assumptions out there. There are also, a lot of stereotypes that exist out there that a lot of those assumptions are, based on, which is why it's so wonderful that you guys provide the research.
Yeah. It, you need the facts. It's hard to
For
forget.
sure. Where do you see niche media evolving over the next few years?
Well, there is a race to digital, right? As digital becomes more sophisticated and easier to use and easier to access, that's only going to grow, especially with video and technology. But I'll tell you a funny, interesting thing right now is the print circulations of all our titles are suppressed because there hasn't been as much. They need the advertising dollars to grow. So I predict that the print products, the circulations are going to really increase once we're sort of over this economic uncertainty that we're in right now. And so I really feel it will grow. And I feel like that can be extended to mainstream media as well. Print is not dead. It's just going to be a little one of those spokes in the wheel. And it's how do you use that properly with your other assets, being video, being your phone, being TV. The interesting thing about our niche, though, with not having TV, it's a very inexpensive market segment because you can really dominate it. And once you have TV in the mix, it's hard to dominate it because of the cost.
So true.
In LGBT media, you can really dominate. My biggest surprise in business is that more people haven't. And the few that have reaped the rewards. Absolut is 40 years later, they still come out on the top of the list of favored vodkas, and in a competitive marketplace, I'm just surprised marketing managers, CMOs aren't more hungry.
Well, hopefully, several of them watch this video, and then that will change some things, right?
Yeah.
So, on that same sort of like topic, so what trends should the agencies and brands start paying attention to, especially when it comes to this audience?
Being inclusive for all market segments is the future. There's just no doubt about it looking at the demographics of this country. So if you're not going to be doing market segmentation, you have to have a very huge, giant budget to otherwise get out. And the nice thing about market segmentation is you can speak to a specific audience in the way they want to be spoken to, whether it's starting with just showing up or whether you're increasing that message and engagement, as you go along. So I just think there's going to be more customization for various market segments. And, it doesn't mean you still should forget about being inclusive in your mainstream marketing, right? That's a part of it too. And it's about seeing your message. I know so many campaigns I'll see on TV and I'm like, oh, they're actually also speaking to me right here. Isn't that great? Right? It's not, I don't think it's going to be one or the other in the future. I think it's really going to be about, doing all you can. What really interesting fact, our biggest growth has been in recessions. And it's because in recessions, everyone tightens their belt. Except this latest thing, right? Because they would tighten their belt and they'd say, well, who are our best customers? Let's focus on those. It would be, that's how we're going to divvy our marketing. So that's what spurred our growth. Now it's a little different because it's just general market uncertainty.
Sure.
But there's good market segments that are worth pursuing, and it's just a matter of if you're going to grab the ball and run with it, is what I would say.
So, if you could change one thing about how the industry approaches audience strategy, what would it be?
That's a tough one. I really wish in the mainstream world that advertising agencies would really make sure that they're educating the buyers. And that, no one's going to know your business better than the people that are involved in it day in and day out. And today, one of the real changes is most media planners, media buyers, they don't give you enough time to actually give them the information that they really do need to make a good decision. So many things. I've even seen media plans. I'm like, oh yeah, they don't have that on there. I'm like, yeah, I forgot to mention it to them because it was a 20-minute meeting and I never got that chance. So I guess just that people would just be a little more thoughtful about making sure they understand what they're getting into and what's involved, and talking to the experts that would know. And almost all of that is free. And that's just me and LGBT, but I'm sure there's somebody like me in Black media and Hispanic media and all these niche medias. Really just understand, talk to at least the people that you can find easily that are experts.
Thank you, Todd. That was great and really insightful. Thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate
It was
it.
fun. I love
This
it.
is exactly, why this series exists. We wanted to share some of the stories behind media companies and to really help, media buyers and planners find and better understand, the many ways in which they can, reach audiences. So again, Todd, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah. Thank you.
For those watching, thank you for joining us for Now You Know Media, part of the Ad Wanted Podcast Network. Ad Wanted Group is a team of experts trusted by the world's biggest media companies, agencies, and brands to advance the advertising industry through pioneering software, data, content, and consulting that create impact. Our solutions include SRDS, where media decisions are made since 1919, SRDS IQ, Ad One, the media leader, Ad Wanted events, including the Future of Media series, and other solutions that advance advertising. Please like this video and subscribe to our channel to follow along as we continue to explore and discuss all things media and advertising. Thanks again for joining us.